All right, so why are there some seeming discrepancies between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2? For example, what we're going to be talking about today is the order of creation. Genesis 1 seems to have the plants, the fruit, the trees, all this stuff coming up on day 3, and humanity created on day 6. And then when you get to Genesis chapter 2, it says that God had caused no plants of the ground to sprout, and then God made man, and then God created a garden for man to live in, and he caused then it to sprout up the different fruit trees and the plants. So how are we supposed to read this? Of course, some people can come at it and say, well, maybe there's a certain, in Hebrew, a verb tense where you're going back and saying, well, God did create it, but it's referring back to like when we use a certain term, a certain form of past tense where he had done this. And they try to argue from grammar, well, the plants were still created before the man. Or other people say, well, that when it says it calls the plants to grow up, it's just talking about one area, the region of Eden and where the garden was, that God had allowed plants to grow elsewhere. And they work on these ways of trying to reconcile. I really think that is the wrong way. That is not the way that Christians should be reading Scripture. Here is my bias. Here is my hermeneutic. Whenever we read any text, we always have a hermeneutic. We always have an interpretive lens. And my belief, my presuppositional belief going into the text is, first of all, that all Scripture, Genesis to Revelation, it is first and foremost, it is primarily theological in nature, and it needs to be read as theology. And not just that, more specifically, it is Christological in nature, that all of Scripture from Genesis to Revelation is focusing on the person and the work of Christ, his incarnation, his death on the cross, his resurrection, his ascension, and his one-day future return. That's what Scripture is about. And so if you ask the wrong questions going into Scripture, you're going to get the wrong answers. If your primary question in reading Genesis chapter 1 or chapter 2 is, how old is the earth? Is this reconcilable with evolution or not? Those are secondary questions. They're not necessarily bad questions. They might even be interesting questions. They might be questions worth a discussion or debate, but they're not the first questions. First question any Christian should have when reading Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 is, what does this show me about Christ? How does this speak of Christ? How does it speak of the glory of Christ? And if we're not asking those questions, we're really going to miss so much. So, for example, Genesis 2. Why is it important? Why does it tell us something about Jesus that the plants had not sprouted up and then Adam was created? Well, there's some good theological reasons for that. If we're reading Genesis 1 as Christological and Genesis 2 is Christological, it becomes very clear why that is. Genesis 1, what does Genesis 1 tell us about Christ? Well, it tells us a whole lot about things, but in relation to humanity, Genesis 1 doesn't talk about the creation of Adam and then the creation of Eve. It talks about God created humanity, man, male and female, in his image, that these are his image bearers who rule the earth, which point forward to the day when the true image of God, Jesus Christ, who perfectly reflects the image of God, comes into the world as King and as Lord, that he is the ultimate, that the humanity in Genesis 1 is just a type of the true image of God who is coming into the world. You get to Genesis 2, and it's shown us something else about Jesus. It's not talking about the creation of humanity. It's talking about the creation of Adam as an individual, and then the creation of Eve. It's dealing with it separately. And so that's showing Jesus not as the image bearer of God of Genesis 1, but it's talking about Jesus as the new and second Adam who goes into the deep sleep of death, and from his side comes forth his bride. Water and blood flow out, and from his side a bride is created. Now, what's this have to do with the vegetation. Well, again, if the theme of Genesis 2 is Adam, what does this tell us? Well, we know what the New Testament says, that Jesus is the last Adam, that he's the new and better Adam, that he is the ultimate Adam, and everything about the old Adam is just a shadow pointing forward to the new Adam, the founder of a new humanity. And this is what we're looking forward to. So if we're to read Genesis 2 as a shadow, as a prefigure, as a type, as a blueprint's not quite the right word, but as a small prototype model projecting what the big ultimate type is supposed to be, why is it important that before Adam is called up out of the ground, that no plants have sprouted from that ground? Let me ask you another way that might give a hint. Why is it important that Adam came forth from virgin dirt? Why was it important that the soil that Adam was created from was virgin soil, that nothing else had grown there before? Why is that? Well, I think the hint might give quite a lot of it away. Adam was created out of virgin dirt to be the founder of a new humanity, just as Jesus was to be created, first of all, out of the virgin womb of Mary, from which no human being, no father had penetrated before, and no other child had been born before. He is the founder of a new humanity. But also, if you carry on in the same theme, this connects us with Jesus' burial, doesn't it? What do 3 of the 4 gospel writers get very specific about? And the 4th kind of suggests, doesn't say directly, but suggests, what do they say about the tomb that Jesus was buried in? Well, that it had never been used. 3 of the 4 gospel writers, well, again, with the 4th one kind of subtly suggesting it, say that the tomb had never been used. No body had ever laid in this tomb before. Because Jesus came forward with his corruptible human nature, out of the virgin womb of Mary, but he came forth in his incorruptible, glorious nature not from a virgin womb, but from a virgin tomb. It had to be that way. The new Adam of the new humanity, had to be born from virgin dirt, out of the virgin tomb, first from the virgin womb and then from the virgin tomb. Well, it was prophesied and preached to us all the way back in Genesis chapter 2, that this founder of the humanity that's coming, that we are to be looking for, he won't be born, and he won't be born a second time into glory in a way that's been traveled before. He's pioneering new territory. He's exploring new terrain. And because he's the founder, we must follow him. He must go where no one else has gone before. This is what we should be looking for when we read Genesis chapter 2. This is why it's important that the dirt that Adam was created out of had never been used to sprout or grow anything before. That's all for now. I hope that gives a little clue on how we as Christians should, first and foremost, be approaching Scripture. Not that other questions are bad or not curious or worthy discussion, but it's not our primary interest as believers. All right, this is what we talk about a lot on this channel. If you like hermeneutics, if you like exploring Christ and Scripture and how we find Christ, particularly in the Hebrew Scriptures in the Old Testament, please like and subscribe, or more importantly, comment. I'd like to hear your point of view and what you have to say about this. Later.